Irreducible by Federico Faggin. Consciousness must be brought into the domain of physics and can no longer be ignored. However, how can a physics entirely based on objective information explain the existence of consciousness when meaningless symbols can only be transformed into other meaningless symbols? How can we bring into physics the meaning that each of us knows exists in our consciousness? For sure, the concept of information is closer to consciousness than matter is. In the field of physics, the idea that information could be more fundamental than matter was first advanced by John Wheeler in 1995 with the catchy phrase, "it from bit." The basic idea is that everything is made of bits, that is, of information. Recently, the theoretical physicist Giacomo Mora Diarano and his collaborators have shown that quantum mechanics and free quantum field theory can be derived entirely from 6 purely informational postulates, validating John Wheeler's intuition. Quantum physics could then be interpreted as follows. Matter energy is simply made up of organizations of quantum bits or qubits, which manifest themselves in the form of classical bits when they are observed. A brief history of biology. Many scholars believe that biology as a science began around 1670 when Antoine van Leeuwenhoek used a microscope first saw that living tissues are composed of cells. He also discovered the first single-cell organisms hitherto not even imagined, which he called animalcules. So I asked a neuroscience professor who was on our science advisory board to explain how the electrochemical activity of the brain transforms into our sensations and feelings. He replied, "Are you talking about consciousness?" I didn't know then that consciousness was the right word for what I was struggling to express, but it sounded correct. "Yes," I replied. "How does consciousness work and why is this word never mentioned?" "Oh, don't worry about it," he said. "It's something that happens somehow in the brain, of course, and one day we'll figure it out." And that was the essence of his explanation. The neuroscientist's position was entirely consistent with the materialist assumption that everything that exists must somehow be produced by the interactions of atoms and molecules. And since I too had embraced materialism, his explanation seemed rational. But how does it work? It was not enough to say that consciousness emerges somehow from the activity of the brain. I needed a real explanation, a mechanism. Then I thought that if consciousness arises from a complex information processing system like the brain, even a computer could be conscious, at least in principle. With great curiosity, I began to consider how could I make a conscious computer? This led me to reflect deeply on the properties of consciousness, and I soon encountered the great obstacle: the total lack of understanding of the nature of sensations and feelings, what philosophers call qualia. Qualia. Our consciousness is the inner semantic space where the signals coming from the physical world, both inside and outside the body, are processed by the brain and take the form of feelings, sensations, and meanings, i.e., of qualia. Qualia refers to what it feels like when a sensation or a feeling emerges within our consciousness. The electrochemical signals produced by our nervous system are manifestations distinct from the sensations and feelings that allow us to live those signals in the form of sentient experiences and to know the meaning of that symbolic information. Qualia and understanding are produced in our consciousness and suggest the existence of a reality vaster than our unconscious physical reality. Consciousness defines the inner world of our experience, which is distinctly different from the physical world of signals that we can measure with our senses and our instruments. To avoid any misunderstanding, I would like to emphasize that what I call inner reality is not the physical reality that exists inside the human body. Inside our body, we can only find physical organs and electrochemical signals. The inner reality of our waking experience does not exist inside the body, but in the same space in which our dreams exist. True intelligence is intuition, imagination, creativity, ingenuity, and inventiveness. It is foresight, vision, and wisdom. It is empathy, compassion, ethics, and love. It is the integration of the intuitive mind, the empathetic heart, and courageous action. In other words, true intelligence is not separable from the other properties that make us human and that require consciousness and free will. It is the ability to comprehend and make unexpected creative and ethical decisions. Machines will never be able to do these things because if they were as free as we are, they would be more dangerous than useful. They do work within limits, but they don't understand. Our comprehension is not reduced to an algorithm. It is, in fact, what can transform a portion of the non-algorithmic meaning into new symbols, i.e. into algorithms. On the other hand, when a human being's consciousness is fully identified with the body and with the logical mind, his creative potential may remain largely untapped, and his behavior may become as mechanical as that of a computer. For example, when a person performs a religious ritual mechanically without any comprehension, the outward behavior may be the same, but the difference between the two is impassable. A conscious being is therefore represented by a quantum system that is in a pure state. If such an entity can transform its own state by maintaining its purity and can create a classical memory of its experience, we have defined a special quantum system, which I call satiety. Satiety is a rarely used English word which means selfhood, personal identity. In the context of QIP, a satiety is defined as a self-conscious entity that can act with free will. A satiety is endowed with a unique and permanent identity because she knows that the conscious experience she is having is her own, and thus she can direct her experience. Being self-conscious is much more than being conscious without identity. Quantum entities that are conscious but not self-conscious I call thought forms. I believe instead that we are satiety who temporarily inhabit our bodies. We are eternal, conscious beings rather than perishable bodies. And we are here to learn crucial aspects of ourselves by interacting with each other in the physical universe that we have co-created for this very purpose. Everything we perceive in the universe was initially envisioned in the consciousness of the deities because classical reality follows quantum reality, not vice versa. And quantum physics follows quantum information, which in turn represents the thoughts, desires, and conscious experience of the deities. This new starting point can also solve the problem of order, the second miracle of physics, because the laws of physics must emerge from the core properties of one, which include consciousness, free will, and the creation of CUs. Thus, we can eliminate all other miracles from physics. Suffering occurs when we are not heeding the call to know ourselves with honesty and integrity. By not facing our inner reality of meaning, we end up living in a virtual reality made only of empty symbols. We may pretend to be happy for a while until the suffering becomes so unbearable that we are forced to look at our avoidance and take care of the real purpose of our existence. Ontology exists only in the semantic, symbolic reality that cannot be separated. This core misunderstanding must be healed as soon as possible because it is leading us astray. We are conscious and luminous fields, not machines. The machines are only the symbolic part of life. The real information is what allows us to know and appreciate each other as conscious human beings, as full expressions of one. I hope that the time will soon come when, as Goethe said, the inner light will come out of us so that we will no longer need any more light. The combination problem can therefore be solved in the context of QIP theory. Since consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, and the quantum superposition of two pure states creates a new pure state with very different characteristics than their components. This would be impossible if consciousness were a classical phenomenon. Consciousness is purely quantum, and so is free will, as we will see later. The attribution of consciousness and free will to quantum systems that are in a pure state with a conversion from quantum information to live information and vice versa has enormous consequences in science, philosophy, and spirituality. In this theory, free will and consciousness coexist and allow the existence of systems capable of transforming meaning, represented by quantum information, into live information and vice versa. This is based on the capacity of such systems to direct their own conscious experience with free will. Quantum physics, from which classical physics emerges as a subset tells us that there are neither separate parts nor particles as objects, nor does probability exist as we imagined it in classical physics. Therefore, there is becoming in the universe which cannot be predicted by any equation or algorithm. This means that the universe could have evolved in an infinity of possible ways using exactly the same laws. In fact, these laws contain 25 physical constants that need to be adjusted with extreme precision to create the universe in which we live. How did those parameters happen to have those specific fine-tuned values we assigned to them to match what we now measure in our universe? Finally, I point out that the union of quantum physics with an adequate theory of quantum gravity, as now proposed, would still not be able to explain the origin of life, consciousness, and free will, and therefore it would not be a theory of everything unless these properties were incorporated into the properties of the unified field, which would then become what I call one. Consciousness, observer, knowledge, pure quantum states, and meaning are an integral part of the aspect that I've called interiority, which, while live information, probability, mixed states, and symbols are part of the other aspect that I call exteriority. But these two aspects must be indivisible because consciousness and information, as well as meaning and symbols, make sense only if both exist together. Without conscious observers, each having their own unique point of view and capable of symbolically communicating with each other, there would be nothing to know, nothing to discover, and nothing to rejoice with, and nothing to love. This is the reason why the universe cannot be classical. If it were, we could not exist because consciousness and free will cannot exist in a classical universe. And yet, a classical universe is intimately connected with live information, which is homomorphic with quantum information and indivisible from it. The classical universe emerges from live information, like live information emerges from quantum information that represents the ontology of meaning that can only be known privately within the fields. The classical universe has the same type of existence as a virtual reality created by a computer. Moreover, the existence of entanglement tells us that all the parts of the universe are interconnected, that there is becoming, and that free will allows us to explore the world of meaning and transform new meaning into new symbols. This is the essence of our individual and collective creativity. Many sages throughout history have suggested that we are beings of light that will not die with the death of the body because we are here to learn and grow. I think we are here to learn to collectively create new worlds in which to operate at a much higher level of cooperation, creativity, and fulfillment than we now can at this early stage of our spiritual evolution. The possibility of experiencing our true nature is already supported by the enlightened personal experiences of millions of people around the globe and by countless anecdotal facts and events that science hesitates to investigate. If we open ourselves to this potential that is dormant in us and ask our greater self to show the way, we may soon be able to experience an unsuspected unity in our lives, the early signs of humanity's awakening to its true power and purpose. I think that the positive forces that will create our future will not be the forces and the laws of matter, but those of conscious cooperation, comprehension, and love for others that all beings in existence must sooner or later manifest because these values are the essence of our deepest nature. I also think that the most effective way to achieve union is through a process of collective and cooperative creation of a just, empathetic, and loving society through right and courageous actions informed by the heart and by the intuitive and rational mind. Then our experience and knowing will grow in our hearts, and they will guide our individual actions through an ever higher level of consciousness. Only when we truly comprehend that we are responsible for our experiences and that the choice is ours alone can we begin to truly know ourselves in the world. To know ourselves more and more, we need a new empathetic science that can convert scientific knowledge into deep lived knowing, and from it generate new scientific knowledge. Similarly, we need a new rational spirituality that can convert lived knowing into new scientific knowledge, and from it generate new lived knowing. These two disciplines can then intertwine in endless and mutual crescendo. This is the essence of the creative principle of one. Within this vision, empathetic science and rational spirituality, integrating and interweaving, will evermore increase our loving, joyful, and fulfilling union with the whole.